Good morning, everybody. What's quack-a-lackin'? I want you to picture this. The year is 1870. You're 22 years old. You come to town with $45, a map, and a compass. And somehow you parlay that into such immense wealth and influence that it propels you into the seat of being the very first United States Senator to represent the state of South Dakota. That is the life of Richard Franklin Pettigrew, one of the wealthiest men of his day. And today we're going to take a look at his home. Before we do that, let's just get a quick look at what the neighborhood looks like today. We're walking through the historic district in Sioux Falls. This is the oldest residential neighborhood in town. It kind of sits on a hillside overlooking the downtown area. All of these homes were constructed in the late 19th and early 20th century. They've been beautifully maintained. You can see they still look absolutely lovely. People still live in them today. And I'm a little bit low-key jealous. I would love to be able to live in one of these homes. Now, if you're like I was, you're probably thinking, sure, he had $45, but that was a lot of money in 1870. And if you're thinking that, you would be just as wrong as I was. It turns out $45 in 1870 is equal to about $1,100 today. More specifically, it's $1,132. So think about that as though you came to town with $1,100 in your pocket. What are you going to do? Because in 2026, that's probably not even enough to really get you into a nice place to live. So he came to town with $45, a map, and a compass, and he built this immense wealth. But he was able to do that because he had some special skills and whatnot at his disposal that gave him an advantage over the average person. Check it out. There is a beautiful home for rent right here in the historic district. What would that be like? Anyway, back on track with Richard Pettigrew and his special skills. The first one was that he was what they called learned in the law, which in 1870 was enough for him to work as a practicing lawyer. Lawyers were in high demand during the pioneer days, not only for your everyday legal needs, but also because throughout the 1870s, the federal government was going to be carving up the Dakota territories, giving land away. I apologize for any traffic noise. They were going to be carving up the Dakota territories and giving away land to encourage settlement of the area. And this was a time when the average person could not read or write, so you really needed the services of a lawyer to help you navigate those land claims. The other thing he had going in his favor was that he had been through this area the year prior in 1869. He had come through here the previous year as part of a government survey team. Ooh, a little bushy. As part of a government survey team that was mapping the Dakota territories. So this gave him an overview of the lay of the land that the average person just didn't have. But also the skills that he learned while on that assignment gave him this unique ability to just pinpoint precisely which properties were going to skyrocket in value. And that made the map and the compass actually much more valuable than the $45 that he brought. So he came to town, he set up a law office and a real estate office, and he went to work. Give you just another quick look of the neighborhood here. So he had his law office and his real estate office going, but he still really had no money to work with. As we said, $45 just really wasn't a lot of money, especially when you just spent part of it to start two businesses, right? And he was in a position where he could look around and see just vast amounts of unclaimed property that he knew was about to be worth serious amounts of money. But he also knew that if he didn't get them, someone else was going to claim the land first. So what do you do in that situation? Well, if you're Richard Pettigrew, you pinpoint the most valuable piece of property on the map, down at the falls. You go down, you construct a shack, you move into this shack, and then you use your legal expertise to file squatters' rights and get the most valuable piece of property in the area for virtually nothing. This is such a beautiful house down here across the street. I just wanted to stop and give you a quick look at this home. It says that it is a folk Victorian home from 1888, built by masonry contractor Marion E. Bowen, and that it is on the National Register of Historic Places if you would like to look it up. It is 840 8th Street in Sioux Falls, but this is absolutely beautiful, as are all the homes in the area. So anyway, back to Richard Pettigrew. So once he had the most valuable piece of property in town, he was able to use that to organize various kinds of financing to acquire other properties in the area. Obviously, ones that he thought were going to be the most expensive properties in the coming years. But he didn't just acquire these properties, he developed them. He built housing for people to live in. He built businesses for people to work in. As time went on, 4 railroads came into Sioux Falls, and he was responsible for bringing all 4 of them in. Later on, he built the hydroelectric power plant that we looked at in Falls Park in the first video. He brought electricity to this city in a day and age when most of the country was still reading by lantern. So as he grew in wealth and prominence and influence, obviously, a man like that becomes more and more politically connected, particularly when communities are developing. You're dealing with zoning issues and business permits and all kinds of things of that nature. It helps to have politicians on your side. So he also became incredibly politically connected, so much so that when the Dakota territories were divided between North and South Dakota moved into statehood, they needed someone to represent the state of South Dakota in Washington, D.C. in the United States Senate. And who better to do that than the man who built a large part of the state? So Richard Pettigrew went on to become the first United States Senator to represent South Dakota. And throughout his years, he grew in wealth and became one of the wealthiest men of his age. And I can't wait to get a look at his house, show you what it looks like. We're just about a block away, so I'll probably show you a few more homes along the way. There is an incredible one right across the street. You have to see this. This is absolutely stunning. Absolutely beautiful. Imagine living in a home like this. This is certainly from the 19th century. It's constructed of quartzite. This stone is well over 1 billion years old. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. With some care and maintenance and periodic renovation, this house could last for a couple of 100 years more. Absolutely beautiful. Anyway, as I said, we're about a block away from the Pettigrew home. Let's just do a little speed walk and get there. And we have arrived. This is the home of Richard Pettigrew. This Queen Anne style home was constructed in 1879. Mr. Pettigrew was not the first owner of the home. It was originally built by another lawyer in town as a newlywed home for himself and his wife. The Pettigrews acquired the home in 1911 and stayed here for the rest of their time on Earth. A couple of quick things that will alert you that this is a Queen Anne style building. I don't know a lot about architecture, but I do know a little bit. The first is the use of combined building materials. You'll notice that, like most of the historic buildings here in town, there is quartzite used at the base of the building. But above the quartzite is brick, and there are even some places that have a little bit of pressed wood. So the use of combined building materials, plus a large centerpiece front porch, those are both things indicative of Queen Anne. But what really gives it away is around the side of the building, you have a column with what is known as a witch's cap on top. And anytime you see one of these columns with the witch's cap, you just already know that this is a Queen Anne building. That's all that you need. It's odd because from the front, if you look at it straight on, it doesn't look that large. But once you come around the side of the building, you begin to get a sense of the scale. There was originally a back porch that spanned the entire length of the house. Mr. Pettigrew demolished that porch in 1923, extended the back of the house, and created a gallery that served as the city's first museum. This museum was constructed in memory of his brother. In addition to everything else they did in life, they were both amateur archaeologists, and they had a large collection of artifacts that they wanted to put on display for the people of Sioux Falls. The house directly across 8th Street from the Pettigrew home belonged to one of his relatives. I want to say it was a sister, but maybe it was a brother. I'm not sure. Perhaps we'll find out today. But I do know that this was a relative's house across the street, and someone actually lives there today. What would that be like? This boulder is what you would call a prehistoric prayer rock. It's had some petroglyphs engraved in it. Mr. Pettigrew acquired this boulder in 1924 from Gettysburg, South Dakota. It took a team of 15 horses and $75 to move it the 17 miles here to Sioux Falls. And the documentation plaque here says that it has handprints, animals, all kinds of stuff on it. But I've walked all the way around and all I can see are these 2 handprints. But it's still very interesting. This particular boulder, this specific one, was written about by Lewis and Clark and Prince Maximilian. They both documented this rock in their journeys. So it's very interesting to see that it has a home here in Sioux Falls. Okay, so the rules. There are rules at play here. The public is free to roam the exterior of the property all that they want. There is a gallery in the rear of the property, and you are allowed to roam and look at that gallery freely as much as you want. To see the rest of the property, to see the interior of the house, you can do that, but the only way is to go on a guided tour. The museum here is open 7 days a week from noon until 5. They give a guided tour of groups of no more than 10 people once an hour. If things get really busy, they will bump that up to every half hour, but generally it's once an hour. It's an absolutely free tour. It doesn't cost you anything. They do accept donations, and if you take the tour, I highly encourage you to please leave a donation and support this project. But next step is I need to get inside, find out what time the next tour starts, see if I can get us registered for the tour. Hopefully they don't have a problem with me filming, because not only do I want to see the inside of this home, but I really want to share it with you guys as well. So let me get inside and find out when the tour starts, and we'll go from there. So check it out. Just like that, we're on the inside. Let me give you a quick little update and disclaimer. The lady who was giving the tour was very insistent that I can't video. And I tried to explain to her that I don't use flash photography and that the policy of the museum does allow me to, but she did not want to hear that. There was another gentleman that worked there who offered to let me use some footage. So I'm going to clip that together, and I'm going to narrate this for you through the magic of voiceover and give you a tour of this house. It starts out in the kitchen, which is very plain. It was a room for function. The maid was the only one who used it. So the walls are simply painted and it's not very decorative, but it did have a really unusual light fixture. It was electric on the bottom and gas on the top. And the reason being that in the late 19th century, the electricity was available, but it just wasn't reliable. So sometimes you could have electric light, sometimes you couldn't. If you look through the doorway into the pantry, you'll see a small piece of furniture there. That is actually an icebox, which is how food was refrigerated at the time. This particular icebox could hold about a 50-pound block of ice. From the kitchen, we move into the family dining room. The Pettigrews would have enjoyed a very formal dining experience. It was very important at that time to know the purpose of all the different knives and forks and plates. This was a time of gentlemen and civilized behavior, so those things were important. There was also a floor buzzer under the table so that Mrs. Pettigrew could press the buzzer with her foot to summon the maid from the kitchen. One of the more visual aspects of the room is this leaded glass window, which shines beautifully during the daytime, and the leaded paint was actually gilded so that it looks just as beautiful at night. The light fixture that hangs above the table is a silver-plated brass, and the globes on the fixture are mouth-blown glass from Tiffany & Company. Mr. Pettigrew and Mr. Tiffany were close personal friends. The painting above the fireplace in the dining room is a representation of the way the area looked the first time Mr. Pettigrew saw it when he came through as part of the survey team in 1869. The island at the top of the falls is no longer there today, but at the time that was Seney Island, named after George Seney, who was Mr. Pettigrew's business partner in the Queen Bee Mill. The buildings are Fort Dakota, which was the only thing really here at the time, and it was closing down. The dirt road that you see running through the left side of the painting would be about where 9th Street is today, if you're familiar with the Sioux Falls area. And the hills that you see in the background to the right of that road would be the location where we're at right now in the Cathedral Historic District. As you leave the dining room, you transition immediately into the family parlor. You can think about this as being sort of like the living room in today's home. The Pettigrew home actually had two parlors. There was a front parlor that was used for entertaining guests, and then there was this rear parlor that was reserved for family only as their private space within the home. Mr. Pettigrew's chair was sort of a predecessor to the modern recliner. It had a retractable footstool that could come out from underneath, and it had knobs in the back that allowed you to adjust the incline of the back of the chair. There is a lot of Asian influence in this room. The senator visited both China and Japan in 1897, and he brought back from that trip the two orange urns that you see in front of the fireplace, along with most of the furnishings of this room. The wall coverings in this home are a silk damask wallpaper. This is a form of pressed silk pattern that is stretched onto the wall. It's a very painstaking process. And while the video does not really capture it, when you are in this room in person, you feel like the color from the wallpaper radiates out into the room. It's almost like you're looking at the room through these pink colored glasses, and it gives this very surreal effect that really adds to the illusion of stepping back into a different time. The ceiling in this room is a hand-painted canvas over plaster. And although it's lost most of its color today, it does serve as a reminder that no expense was spared on the interior of this home. On the left side of the room, you'll see a pair of sliding double doors. These were used to separate the front parlor from the family parlor. So we've seen the family parlor, let's take a look at the other room. The front parlor was used entirely for entertaining guests to the home. The most prominent feature of this room is this Steinway grand piano from the 1870s. Mr. Pettigrew's first wife was a very talented pianist, and she loved to play piano for the guests. But following her passing in 1916, the piano was sold due to the depressing nature of memories tied to something like that, which I totally understand. And this one was brought in by the museum later to serve as an example of what you would have expected to see in the room at the time. The walls in this room depict portraits of the founding members of the Sioux Falls community. Mr. Pettigrew's portrait is to the right of the window. This gentleman is Charlie Howard. He was a fur trader and riverboat man on the Missouri River who came to Sioux Falls to open a general store. It was one of the very first businesses in town. Over in the corner of the room, we can see a portrait of Nye Phillips, who held many civic offices in the early days of Sioux Falls. Across the room in the other corner, we see Mr. L.T. Dunning. Mr. Dunning owned the very first drugstore in Sioux Falls and was married to the senator's sister, Henrietta. They're the ones that lived in the house that we looked at across the street. Just off of the front parlor is the foyer where guests would have first arrived at the home. You would have been greeted by the maid and brought inside this foyer where you would have presented her with a calling card announcing who you are. Inside the foyer was a fireplace to sit by, there was a place to hang your hat and coat, and around the corner there was a small sink where guests could freshen up and prepare to be received by the family. There is a very comfortable seating area next to the fireplace. This was a time of refinement, so gentlemen usually wore a bowler hat and white gloves and carried a walking stick. Senator Pettigrew had a collection of more than 30 walking sticks. The busts in front of the fireplace are what the senator affectionately referred to as his portraits in marble. The senator himself is on the right of the fireplace, and his brother Fred is on the left. Fred had followed his brother Richard to the Dakota Territories and is regarded as one of the founding members of the town of Flandreau, a little north of Sioux Falls. Even though guests were commonly received downstairs, the upstairs of the home would have been considered a private space that only family was allowed to see. But today I get to show it to you. Let's go take a look. The upstairs study was the senator's favorite room in the house, and I have to say that it's mine as well. I can see why he enjoyed it. The senator left specific instructions in his will as to what should be in this room and where it should be placed. On the wall above one of the bookcases are portraits of the senator's parents, Andrew and Hannah Pettigrew. Is it just me, or does his father look a little bit like Abe Lincoln? But one interesting side note is that the walking stick that his father is holding in that portrait is the exact same walking stick that is on display in the study's card table. Mr. Pettigrew was a very well-read man and a fan of the written word. He had more than 5,000 books in his collection and was essentially his own internet. But as a fan of the written word, he also has a newspaper from 1881 framed and on display in the study. 1881 was the most brutal winter on record. It started snowing that year in about mid-October, and it didn't stop for even one day until mid-April. So it didn't take long before the roads and the railways were impassable and hopeless to clear. So Sioux Falls began to dry up on many things. Definitely by February, they were drying up on most things, including newsprint. This was a time when the newspaper was incredibly important. So what they did was went to the local warehouse and bought up all of the linen for shirt making material and printed the newspapers on linen. And Mr. Pettigrew saved one of those for us to see today. It was very common in the senator's day for married couples to have separate bedrooms. The senator's room was the smaller bedroom on the front of the house. You can see it's somewhat plain compared to the rest of the house, and that's because this was purely a functional room. It wasn't a place to hang out or to watch TV or to play games. It was purely a place to go to sleep, so there was no need for it to be as decorative as the rest of the home. Mrs. Pettigrew enjoyed the larger bedroom on the side of the home. She had direct access to the restroom and her own heater. However, both of the bedrooms did feature walk-in closets, which were a brand new feature at the time. Mr. Pettigrew used this room to store artifacts from his collection, but today it houses some things that belonged to him, including this traveling desk that came from his land office downtown on Phillips Avenue. This entire desk can fold up and be put on a train to go with you as you travel. It was essentially the laptop of its time. So that pretty much concludes this tour of the inside of the Pettigrew home. Let me get back downstairs and I will meet you guys outside. So you're probably wondering just how wealthy was Richard Pettigrew. His wealth throughout his life went up and down like a roller coaster. And at the time of his passing in 1926, he was no longer at the richest he had been during his peak. There was a market scare in 1893. It basically tanked the U.S. economy. And like most plutocrats of the time, Pettigrew lost virtually everything during that scare. There were people who said that he left the Senate a broke and bitter man, but that just simply wasn't true. Richard Pettigrew was a very industrious person. He had an entrepreneurial drive that just wasn't matched. And a man like that just doesn't give up when the chips are down. He does what a man like Pettigrew does. He learned lessons from the events. He picked himself up, dusted himself off, and through a series of real estate developments in Gary, Indiana, he was able to rebuild a good portion of his wealth. If anyone from Gary, Indiana should ever see this, please shout out in the comments and let me know if you've ever seen the name Pettigrew around town, because I would be really interested to know. So through those real estate developments in Gary, Indiana, he was able to rebuild his wealth. At the time of his passing in 1926, he was valued at about $150,000, which may not sound like senator money in today's terms, but consider that in 1926, $150,000 was equal to about $2.5 million today. And that makes two different times in this man's life that he started from nothing and built a fortune. I got respect for that. When he did pass, he left a number of holdings to the city of Sioux Falls. One is the Queen Anne home behind me. He also at that time owned virtually all the land on both sides of the Big Sioux River, which circles the downtown area. He left all that land to the city, which they then developed into a system of parks and greenway trails that I use and enjoy on a regular basis. In fact, we've already looked at two on this channel, Falls Park and Yankton Trail Park. Those were both originally Pettigrew properties that he left to this city. And being that I enjoy these places on a regular basis, I feel like I personally owe this man a debt of gratitude for what he gave to this community. And that's part of why it was so important for me to make the Pettigrew House video, despite the fact that they didn't want me to make it. Now, one good thing is while I was inside, I found out that the house across the street, it's known as the Donnelly House. It was, in fact, his sister's house. So that's one thing that I wanted to find out for sure, and I'm glad I found it out. And now that I'm here in front of it, I see that there's a plaque that explains the whole thing. So his sister lived here. That's about all I have for the Pettigrew House. I really wanted to do this video, and I'm hoping I can put something together with what I have and what Mr. Kevin has provided me. Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you so much. So I'm going to do what I can, and hopefully we can put something together. Next week, we're going to do something totally different. This week, we talked about a man who was a lawyer, a real estate tycoon, a politician. Next week, we're going to go 180 degrees. Talk about a man who lived his life on the opposite side of the law, a real American outlaw. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, next Wednesday at 1, we'll see what we can do. No one's going to tell me I can't record at that place because it's wide open for me to do whatever I want. So next week's video should be a better one. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. I don't know till I get into editing, but I hope I can pull something together. Until then, I'm going to leave you guys with a shot of the sister's house right here. And I found out that before the Pettigrews got this Queen Anne home, they lived at the house diagonally across the street from the sister. So I'll leave you with a shot of the sister's house and a shot of the old Pettigrew house. And I'll see you guys next week. I love you all so much. Thank you for watching. Quackers out. Just a little bit of bonus footage before I get to that end shot of the sister's house and the original Pettigrew house. I just want to give a couple of shout outs real quick. Cody and Brooklyn. I was so shocked and embarrassed to show up in your recommended feed on YouTube, but you were incredibly nice and supportive. You had no jokes to make. And I really appreciate you watching. So I just want to say thank you for that now that I've gotten over my initial embarrassment. Actually, I was even more shocked that I showed up in your recommended feed. I didn't even know that you watched YouTube. I thought you were purely a Reels girl. But you were also incredibly supportive and had nothing but nice things to say. So I just want to say thank you for watching and for being so kind. Sunshine, ¿cómo está, po? Do me a favor, if you ever see a video I make that you think is in a very pretty setting, send it to your family back home. Show them what it looks like where you live at now. I think they'll find it interesting just because it's so different from what they normally see. So there's more people to mention, but I don't want to make the video run on too long. I just want to end you with the closing shot of the sister's house and the old Pettigrew home from before they moved into the one that they ended at. I'll see you guys next week. I love you all. Quackers out.